how I try and instill that is, you'll set that sort of the agenda, the goals around what we're trying to do, but then you bring together the groups of people who can contribute to that conversation and effectively let them have at it. So if they know what they're trying to achieve, they're going to be better at working out how to solve that than me, usually. And so
hi everyone, welcome to this week's Lessons with Leaders podcast. I'm joined by Adam Jordan, SVP Engineering and Architecture for Mintel. He's kindly jumped on today to give us a bit of an overview about himself, his background, certain struggles that he potentially may come across within his team, and any advice for engineers looking to get into a technical leadership role. So yeah, welcome. If you can just give me a bit of an overview, if that's okay, Adam, and we'll kind of get it going.
Okay, yeah. So I am currently SVP Engineering at Mintel, which is a role where I'm responsible for, as the title suggests, development activity for data engineering, software engineering, QA, those sorts of things, as well as our architecture function. Mintel is a market intelligence company, so we work with all sorts of companies, from the people that manufacture ingredients, make products like your food and drink beverage companies, as well as then your large retailers that, and generally it's all because they're trying to understand what's happening, what products are being launched, what are people interested in, and what trends are happening that maybe down the line they should be trying to target when they launch new products. So yeah, so that's where I am now. In the past, software engineering degree, which I really local. So I did that in University of Glamorgan, now University of South Wales. Spent a little bit of time in Ministry of Defence on their grad scheme. And then after that is when I started to switch over to software engineering as a focus. So that's where I first came across Mintel. First came across IntaPeople, because I applied for a job through IntaPeople, and then IntaPeople pointed me to another opportunity that was available, and that's how I ended up at TraceMart, and that was sort of the start of my journey then, really. So I worked there in what was a relatively small company in Cardiff, 60 people or so, for quite a few years, and then we were acquired by LexisNexis, which is a very large company, part of RELX, FTSE 100. And we just went through that journey of becoming part of this big machine, but doing our own thing as well as the team in Cardiff, and growing through there, and then moved to Mintel.
Great. No, thank you for the overview. I think it's quite a nice story actually as well, that you don't come across there often. That I said, IntaPeople and your history goes back over a decade, I guess.
Yeah, it's a long time. Long time. That was 2010. Something like 2010. So
wow.
a year out of uni, and then just trying to find that, open that door into a software engineering career. Yeah.
Being a leader within the tech industry then, and being responsible for a large amount of engineers, what does a typical day look like for yourself? And kind of what challenges do you face?
Yeah, so just for context around the team and what they look like, we've got a fairly large team. It's about 100 people in engineering and architecture, and that team is split across the world. So we've got people in London, we've got people in Chicago, a team in Shanghai, and then another team in Belfast. And then obviously you've got a few people dotted around elsewhere as well, including me, because I'm based in Cardiff. So, and Mintel's journey is it's a 50-year-old company. So that's a company with a lot of history. And then in the last few years, going through a lot of change and evolution to try and kind of evolve for the future. And so a day for me will be very different depending on the day, but you would normally have lots of conversations with people. I like to talk, get a feel for what's going on and really understand it, but also then just make sure that teams have what they need, that people understand what we're trying to achieve, all that sort of stuff, rather than sort of necessarily kind of trying to jump in and micromanage or anything like that. But then similarly, you need to understand that things are going well and things are working, and look into the future. So, so one day I might be in lots of sort of random one-to-ones with team members, and then the next day it could be a trip out to see a company or something. The next day it'll be the tech conference, and then the next day we'll be sitting in some sprint reviews and seeing what teams have been up to and chatting about that. So yeah, it's a good amount of variety. I like it.
Good. And it's interesting, you said obviously you're responsible for I guess quite a large team of engineers spread around the world. How do you drive, I guess, how do you drive the culture, I guess, especially remotely, which is obviously a huge topic at the moment, and I guess continuous learning within your teams as well, as there may be obviously often disconnect between different countries.
Yeah, and that's been a bit of a journey for me. So I've been at Mintel for 3 years. When I joined, the teams had just gone through that move from being pretty much office-based to a lot more sort of remote. It was during the pandemic. And then similarly, I was joining in effectively a remote position, and could only really get to the London office at the time. And so to start with, that's lots of meeting people, just trying to get yourself established, get to know what's going on, understanding the goals, like what are those teams trying to achieve, but also understanding what are the pain points, what's causing them difficulty to just get their jobs done. Over time, obviously, that just helps you get into some sort of rhythm with what's going on. But we also did start to then look at like org structure and team and make that fit around that global model. So that doesn't mean that you have a team in Chicago that does one thing and a team in London that does a different thing. But it is helpful to try and have teams who are, relatively co-located or, are on the same time zone, focused into solving one problem. And so there was quite a lot of work there to really get that right. Beyond that, how do you drive the culture innovation? So a big part of that for me is just trying to make sure that everyone understands what we're trying to achieve. We've spoken about what we're trying to do for the year, but we're also, on a zooming in a bit, we're talking a lot about those near-term goals. What new product or feature are we trying to build? What modernization are we trying to go through? And the things that everyone needs to understand, because people can then ask questions and throw in ideas. And the other one is trying to make sure that everyone feels heard and can really contribute to that. And that's really important. So example of how I try and instill that is, you'll set that sort of the agenda, the goals around what we're trying to do, but then you bring together the groups of people who can contribute to that conversation and effectively let them have at it. So if they know what they're trying to achieve, they're going to be better at working out how to solve that than me, usually. And so just trying to set up those basic processes that mean the right conversations are happening. There's enough sort of visibility of what's going on, but otherwise the teams can go at it and solve those problems in sort of nice creative ways. When the companies maybe at the earlier stages are relatively small, they can get away with that sort of maybe slightly more dictatorial way of running it, but that quickly runs out of runway when the teams grow or the business grows and the kind of the amount of things you're trying to achieve sort of scale. That one leader can't do everything and solve all the problems, and so it quickly runs out of runway. But it can be an interesting challenge for people to evolve, and I think that's sometimes why you see the change in leaders after a certain point in the company's growth, because they need to transition from maybe the person that's really hands-on into a person that's a little more like operational and team focused, so that you can take that change.
Reflecting back on your career as well, if you've got any, but what would be or one mistake that ended up being kind of a major learning experience for you?
Okay, yeah. So I thought about this one, and one came to mind really quickly. So back that first company that I was mentioning to people, sort of helped me find. So that was TraceSmart. It was a relatively small company in Cardiff, and then we went through that journey of being bought by LexisNexis, and that was their way of sort of getting into the UK market, going more global. And when that happened, you go from being this small company where everyone's kind of doing a bit of everything, you've got a reasonable amount of control, to suddenly being part of this massive machine. we went through 3 years of kind of integrating into the company and sort of getting kind of a little bit more closely aligned to what they were doing. But the big mistake I made there was that was also when I was sort of stepping into leadership and kind of and sort of learning. But we were, and I particularly was, very defensive around our team and trying to maintain our culture and sort of trying to kind of keep everyone else at arm's length. And
Yeah.
maybe the big part there is maybe assuming that they either they didn't know best or that their intentions were not all genuine and true and sort of for the best of us in the company. Now, what that meant was for those 3 years, we made progress, but we were a bit of an island. We didn't get the benefit of these other great teams that were all over the world as well.
Yeah.
We didn't learn quite so much, and we rebuilt sort of we had to kind of work out and build things using patterns that we didn't know, but these other teams could have easily shared with us if we just listened a little bit more. And so the lesson there was, I guess, sort of trust people and assume good intentions.
Yeah.
Obviously, don't be naive, but
Yeah.
assume good intentions, and then you tend to go into those interactions a lot more openly. They'll listen to you, you listen to them, and it's a lot less confrontational. And similarly, obviously, recognize that everyone's got strengths and sort of skills that they can bring to the table. And so that in a small team that works well because individuals tend to interact better, but in the larger teams and companies, that's really important because there's always going to be a team that you'll maybe doesn't quite align to the way you think someone should do something, but that's fine as long as they're able to help you and you're able to help them.
Yeah.
Build trust and relationships. Don't try and be an island.
Yeah. No, I like that word relationships because you can almost ring fence yourself.
Yeah.
And like you mentioned, you're on your own island, you're hidden away, and you're not exposing yourself and your team to other areas of the business then as well for,
Yeah.
well, yeah, progression, growth, self-development.
Yeah.
And I guess it can, I often see when companies, you mentioned, obviously the company come in and acquired them, we do see hostile takeovers and they always seem and looked at in that way. Whereas I think predominantly, yeah, there's other routes and you can get lots of positive experiences out of
And the
those
way that went for
takeovers.
us was really positive in the end. 3 years of really hard graft and sort of finding your feet as well as them finding their feet with actually kind of buying the company. But after that, if I look back, once we stopped being quite such an island, we still had a nice position where we were in Cardiff, kind of doing our own thing, having a bit more control, but then similarly supported by this great network of people all over the world.